Julien Kaspar is a 3D artist at the Blender animation studio, most notably being the only modeler credited on one of the most recent Blender animation studio short films called Spring. So today we're gonna go through an interview he did with CG Cookie and learn new things from this great Blender artist. He starts off saying, "I wish I had no identifiable style, but I am definitely leaning towards the stylized and cute. When I was starting out with 3D art, I was trying out different styles and was experimenting more. Finding and sticking with a style can be very gratifying since you can hone your skills in a very specific field, but your style can eventually become stale. I recommend not setting your style in stone and experimenting a bit. Looking at my portfolio, I do realize I had done almost no realistic work or detailed creatures. The open movie Spring was luckily leaning more in that direction, which was very refreshing. I don't want to do the same things over and over again, so I will try to seek out some projects that force me to do different things." I think there are multiple reasons, and they also changed and expanded over the years for me. The biggest one from the start was that it is free. Then I got more into it, then I realized what an all-in-one package it is. Its open source nature and the active community was also something very encouraging from the start, and still a major factor. Another great but also frustrating part is that Blender is not afraid of reinventing itself. Things change, and the developers are willing to evolve the software to a point where it is not going to be recognizable. The software, the team behind it, and the community surrounding it are growing, and I'm glad that I'm part of it. This video is brought to you by sketchfab, a platform for buying and selling 3D models online. Their store has a lot of high quality models to choose from using a great model inspector. Links in the description. The Blender Development Fund has exceeded everyone's expectations, and there is more support and resources than ever before. With some time, I can see Blender not just become an absolute beast of a software, but also formidable influence in the industry. Right now, we are seeing the seed being sown for dramatic improvements and collaborations in the coming years. Essentially, what I contributed to the movie was the asset library for the environment, and I did the modeling and most of the texturing or shading for the characters. There was also some FX work late in the production to make the plants grow, and I helped out in the design of the creatures and props. Added to that is some set dressing throughout the movie. Actually, this does sound like a lot, but it is important to keep in mind that the team was very small and everyone was helping out everywhere. For example, Andy didn't just direct the movie, but also the art and many other things. His influence was over everything, and most of what he did wouldn't have turned out to be nearly as good without him. Most of the sets were also designed and sometimes completely made by him and based on the concepts of David, even if they were populated with the same asset library. There was also a lot of feedback and influence from the animation team on the characters, and Andy again stepped in to take over some of the shading and all of the grooming and hair simulation and rigging. And lastly, when looking at the growing shots, there is a lot of work from Pablo Vasquez in there, and without some technical knowledge from the other Blender veterans at the studio, I would have stumbled in the dark. And that was the greatest thing about working on the film. I learned so much during the production that I am impressed by how many of my fingerprints ended up in the movie. But that's easier to accomplish if everyone is holding each other's hands while doing it. Oh boy, what wasn't hard to model? I think each asset had its own unique difficulty. On one side, we had the library of rocks that had to be sculpted. Now I wish we had some of the new upcoming sculpting features. Those would have made it a lot easier. Then there is the modular creation approach of the trees, where I had to model individual branches and put every variation of the tree together with a lengthy instancing and collection setups. But probably the high resolution madness of the creatures was the trickiest part, since we had to figure out how to add the close-up details after the model was already done and rigged. So if you download the creature production files from the Blender cloud, you will see that all the multi-resolution modifiers are still on and were never baked. I'm still surprised this worked out so well. Of course, in the end, the whole production was a challenge since it was mostly done in pre-alpha, alpha and beta versions of Blender 2.8. Probably not to base your career on Blender itself. This of course depends on what kind of career you are talking about. I didn't start out as a Blender artist, but just an artist. I tried out and threw away many different software packages, some I didn't like at all, but I learned some interesting features that make them appealing and efficient to use. Others I liked a lot, but still always compared them to the other software including Blender. Only using Blender or only working with open source is admirable, but first and foremost, you should work on your skills independent from any other software and team up with like-minded people to develop your soft skills as well. Before working at Blender, my main tools were including Softimage, Maya, Substance Painter, and ZBrush, and I learned a lot using them since they do something very well in their own right. It was easier for me to learn important lessons when I didn't have to fight the software while doing it. And once I got to work on Spring with the development software, those lessons become a helpful backup to help me finish the film and also help me improve the software. It is a simple thing. I wish I could have slapped myself in the face early on for always wanting to model or sculpt everything from one connected object. It just makes things unnecessarily hard and messy. Also make sure that you model non-destructively with modifiers and build up details over time. You will save yourself some headaches down the road when feedback comes back your way. On a related note, don't beat yourself over not using your own concepts. Focus on the modeling aspect instead of designing everything too. Otherwise, it's too much to learn at once. I used to beat myself over always using my sculpts and models on other artists' concepts, and it made me feel very guilty and ultimately unproductive. It was like I repurposed their art and slapped my name on it. This is normal though. People specialize, and there is no shame in interpreting a concept into a 3D model, since this is also an important exercise and skill. And just credit the concept artist, of course. Lucky coincidences. I was at the end of a 3-year contract and I had been looking for new work. At the time, I got an email from Todd Rosendale asking if I had time to join the studio for their next project. I came over for an interview, and at the end of the day, I had a signed contract. For me, it came pretty much out of nowhere, but it was quite interesting to find out they had been aware of my work for a while. We should really appreciate the social outreach of the internet and the ties within the Blender community. Probably my favorite part is that I'm not just sharing knowledge, but also seeking it. Before diving into any recording or editing, I research and educate myself further. This really helps to increase the quality of the educational material, but it also makes the act of teaching go both ways, which is wonderful. My least favorite would be editing. I'm still struggling to find the right piece of software, and getting an efficient workflow for creating the final videos is still rather slow right now. Another great thing is how my opinion on teaching changed. I always had a negative view on it, like I was putting myself on a pedestal and preaching things I knew nothing about. But it is great exercise in researching, writing, speaking, and examining your own knowledge that you don't get that often otherwise. My top priority right now is to finish the one I have right now. It is quite a big project that is taking way longer to complete than I had originally intended. After that, I would love to continue making small tutorial series like a short beginner course in sculpting, as well as more quick tips and production breakdown videos. And then there is also a new movie to work on very soon. Time will tell. I hope you found this interview very interesting. If you want to add something, you can do this in the comment section below. Also, you can find all the links in the description. Thank you very much, and I'll see you in the next one.